Welcome to CaCo Talks, the weekly podcast where conversations about life, hot topics, mental health, and more take center stage. We are your hosts, Catelyn and Courtney Geiger.
Together, we explore thought-provoking discussions with an ambient vibe that inspires open and honest dialogue. So sit back, relax, and join us for some insightful conversation that will leave you feeling informed and inspired.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we are talking about an interesting topic that may or may not ruffle some feathers. So we're going to do a small little disclaimer. If you feel like this is an episode that you should not watch, or this is something that may get under your skin in any way, or if you feel like this is not relevant to you, or you are not in the space to critically think about the topic we were talking about today, we advise that you just join us in the next one. So today our topic of choice is to talk about the Black church, right? So I guess I'll say this too, that we had kind of thought about doing this episode earlier on in our podcasting, I guess, career, and I can't remember if we exactly chose not to do it because of the sensitive nature of this topic, right? Or if it was because we just didn't have the proper planning, right? Or like what exactly we're going to talk about. Well, we ran across a wonderful TikToker. I think her name is it Daven?
I think it's Daven.
Daven. Courtney
It's
thinks it's Daven.
Daven.
I think it's Daven. But her TikTok is I am Daven or Daven Drew. And we're going to link all her stuff below because we're using several of her videos to talk about the Black church today. So check out that in the description box below. And make sure you go watch those videos because we're actually going to play them in this episode. But go and watch her videos as well. They're really, really good. And obviously we want to support her since we're using her stuff as well. So that's what we're talking about today. Courtney, do you have anything you want to add to the disclaimer?
Yeah, we I also wanted to add that because we are thinking critically about, like we said, the Black church today in this podcast. That is not to say that we discourage anybody from their own personal religious and or spiritual beliefs. Okay, this is a critical examination of the institution of church, specifically in the Black community. So please, we want to make sure that we have a separation between the two in our minds right now. So go ahead. If you for some reason cannot do that, then this might not be the episode for you. But we are speaking about this critically. So we are separating what is a personal spiritual belief versus the institution of a church. So please frame your thoughts through that lens.
And like I said, if you're not in the space to critically think about these things, this probably is not the episode for you. So just join us in the next one.
Yes. And also, we're not here to discourage anybody either from their own personal practices with the church. We're just thinking critically about it. This is just information that is being put out there. So, praise the Lord, amen, all of that. If that's what you want to, if that's what you like really want to do, this is not discouraging you from doing that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, that's our disclaimer. But like Caitlin said, let's get into some of these thoughts that actually we were inspired by to have this conversation. So we'll play the first one for you guys right now.
Please remember, Black women, the church has a vested interest in making sure that you don't go on a self-love journey or decenter men. Remember, you guys were the ones who were paying their bills. You were the ones who were tithing. You were the ones who were dragging those men to church. So now that you are deconstructing your mind and maybe deconstructing your religious practices, because we found the Black Christian church, specifically toxic ones, are very misogynistic, or you're no longer centering men, so you're not praying to God for that man who has been stringing you along for the last 18 years of your life to finally become a better person. You don't need to go to church to pray for that. The church is losing money. If Black women decide to stop going to the Black church will not exist. They have a vested interest in reminding you that you need to keep going out, keep making babies with Black men, keep begging for some type of man, specifically a Black man, to want you, and keep realizing that you are just not good enough, but you're almost there in the eyes of God.
All right, so the first sort of topic that Daven I'm gonna call her Daven. I hope I'm not butchering
Okay.
her name. That
That's
Daven
fine.
is talking about is how church is using Black women, essentially how the Black church has historically used Black women, and their suffering, frankly, to keep their bills paid, right?
Mm-hmm. And to keep the population of indoctrinated people coming. Women are typically bringing their husbands and then bringing even their children. So that keeps the generation coming and going, and the people who are there paid.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what she was talking about in this first video clip is how they rely on how toxic Black churches rely on basically misogyny, patriarchy, and
Mm-hmm.
these like institutions, which are not necessarily religious institutions.
Mm-hmm.
They rely on those indoctrinations to keep Black women in the church, i.e., like find a good Christian man, get married, have children, because all of that keeps people tithing to their church, keeps people invested in their congregation, keeps money in their pockets, keeps the institution going. So they need their members, who are the lifeline of this church, to follow a certain standard. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
A lot like how we've discussed in previous episodes how capitalism works, right? Like we see the nuclear family serves a direct purpose for capitalism, right? The same thing as these churches, the nuclear family, which they maintain through keeping Black women close to the chest,
and oppressed.
And to keep women invested in this idea of I need to find a good man, just need to find a good Christian man. That ideology, it propagates their institution. It keeps them going. Yeah. So what do you think about that?
No, I definitely think in my experience, obviously I don't really go as an adult, but in my experience, I definitely saw that. Now, did I have the understanding that I have now? No, but I definitely saw this. Oh, all the time. Like even the thing about like I don't think you can be you can't just be a deacon without having or like a deaconess without having a deacon, right? Like you have to have a husband to want to achieve these things or be these things in the church and different things. You're not respected as a woman unless you're married and you have a husband and da 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 and you're like tithing at a certain amount. And the push on tithing is interesting. I've seen certain churches that I've gone to, they're tithing 2 and 3 and 4 times, and it's like because they didn't get enough. Like what? Huh?
Yeah.
That I'm giving you what I can give you. You know, on top of we're in the middle of pretty much a financial crisis, and you 2 and 3 and 4 times. Like, come on now. Like, mind you, I'm a maybe a single parent or a single father, or maybe I just can't afford it. I have a house payment of daycare, right? Like that just doesn't never made sense to me. But that definitely the way the church runs in African American churches, because I haven't never been to anything outside of African American churches, is absolutely absurd to me. It's supposed to be a place where you are supposed to grow and learn, but that is the most suffocating place I probably have ever been to. And the people there are just as suffocating because they really don't want you to grow and learn other than what they want you to grow and learn, which is, to me, indoctrination. It usually has a motive in that we want you to stay where we want you to be so we can get what we want from you. Which in the video she talks about like the self-love thing. They don't want women to go on a self-love journey because if they went on a self-love journey, they wouldn't be there, I don't think. And so I watched another TikToker say too in a different video a while ago. He was saying that he really feels like people use religion as a crutch and as a mechanism as a mean of coping, essentially, to get through what they're getting through. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Because I don't think that what they're teaching you is something that you can't have on your own, first of all. And why do you need someone to teach you? And that's kind of like what what your relationship with God is supposed to teach you is, relying on Him and praying to Him and things like that. Like you can do that without having the institution of a church manipulating you, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's just interesting.
I just find it deeply ironic that what they're preaching is love and getting to a higher power, higher being, right? Higher self, and in connection with with Jesus in this case, because we're talking about
But
Christianity.
they're not
But
practicing.
it's the same, but they're suppressing that at every other turn. Every other, because like she said, they have a vested interest in making you not love yourself and making you still quote suffer. Suffering is their business. That is what they sell. They sell they sell hope and quote remedies for suffering, but they need you to suffer in order to be there in the first place.
Yeah, for sure.
To purchase their product.
The thing is, usually you're people who are like critically thinking and who are not relying on the idea of a church and religion, right? Are not going. It's only those who are looking for something.
Agreed.
Looking for maybe an opportunity, looking to be saved, looking to be healed, looking to be, and those things are things that, to be fair, don't be wrong, you can believe in God, but you can do those things in some aspects. You have to be independent in doing some of those things yourself, you know?
Well, if you, the issue is if you really do the work to heal, become better, then you no longer, it's like preventative healthcare versus versus what do they call it? Just like responding.
They're fixing, they pretty much not fixing the issue. They're pretty much symptom management.
Symptom management versus preventative. I'm gonna have to, if the church is doing symptom management, if I go in the world and I suffer, then I come here and I'm sold this like somehow higher state, right? Of like where you no longer suffer while still being kept in the same suffering position instead of actually healing.
And the thing is, you're sold on getting to not suffering. You're not necessarily not suffering anymore. Like they're not making you not suffer. They're just selling you the idea of not experiencing suffering anymore, right?
Which is what Christianity often is. It's and I think this is what is really misinterpreted about the actual Bible. That's why I say the Bible is different than, in my opinion, when you look at the Bible as a text, it's very different than just what Christianity preachings are.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that they, like, a lot of people take the Bible for what they want to take it and then make you believe what they want you to believe. And it's just very true. There's no critical thought in that, you know. I think that's indoctrination.
Agreed. Well, I think that there's like, the church is all about getting to another place, getting over, getting through, which is why, to bring it back historically, that's why Christianity has resonated with African Americans, people who are descendants of American chattel slavery, because what hope did Black people have besides getting to the other side, getting through something, getting to this, other state of paradise where you are no longer subservient. You are, you're no longer the tail, you are the head.
But even that, though, if we critically think about like Christianity, right? To be fair, when the slaves were brought over here, that was not their primary religion, you know?
No, it wasn't. But that's what,
and so that was something that was also forced on them to indoctrinate them. But that's why it's always very difficult to believe or to understand why African Americans still continue to feed into the idea of Christianity and the religion of the Black, I guess, like even further than that, like the Black Baptist Church, if you will, right? And then the small denominations under that, right? Because those things were only into play to make people believe certain things.
It's like, it's kind of the idea that it's like they liken the Black people's experience to the Israelites, because when you really get into the Bible, the Israelites were suffering. That's what they did. They suffered, but they were God's chosen people. So all they had to do was believe and keep following the commandments of God's prophets and keep following God's commandments whenever God would actually physically speak to them, right? Through people like Moses. When those that is almost a direct correlation to what was happening in American chattel slavery, or that could be used as a direct correlation. Like, you got these people who are oppressing us, and we are God's, but we are secretly God's chosen people. So one day, if we just hold on, if we just hold out, if we just keep the faith, instead of really looking at, and that's what the church is praying on, is just keeping the faith. Keeping the faith versus
and beyond keeping the faith, it's keeping you
evolving.
ignorant. That's what it is. That's how I read it, as someone who's a little bit more objective, because I don't necessarily go to church every day, right? It's keeping you ignorant. It's keeping you in a place that they want to keeping you. They want to keep you at, right? Because if you are not thinking about these things in a higher context, then you're going to fall for it, essentially. Because the thing is, you can still believe in God and not have to believe in the rituals of Christianity or what someone is telling you to believe.
Agreed. And like she was saying, self-worth is the antidote to all of that.
Yeah, and they don't want you to have that because it keeps you there. Exactly. It's just kind of like leaving an abusive relationship, right? If that person gets your self-esteem and your self-worth so down and then make you completely reliant on them to have anything, it's going to be harder to leave. You're going to have to really do some work to get yourself in the mental space, the financial space, the physical space, so that you can leave. Same thing. It's like a domestic abuse situation.
Agreed.
And the thing is, I'm not going to say that I don't think religion and Christianity played a role, and it had value in what our ancestors were dealing with, such as like slavery and things like that, right? I think it definitely had a role, and it kept hope alive for that time. But today, I think is less applicable. It's just like, it doesn't quite make sense, I don't think, anymore. It's a dated practice, if you ask me.
Well, I think the way the church is, I think spirituality is always alive.
Oh, for sure.
I think the institution of a Black church is incredibly archaic. It's incredibly dated, and it refuses to evolve.
Yeah. I will go back and say this. What I'm talking about specifically when I say dated is the institution of the church as a whole. I don't think there's a problem with believing in God, if that's what you believe in. I don't think there's a problem with being spiritual. I don't think there's a problem with even having a community of people who believe in the same things that you believe, right? But I think the problem is when you're trying to keep people
upholding an institution.
You're trying to uphold an institution. And basically, if you ask me, the church is a form of manipulation, in that it is keeping you here without truly explaining its intent on keeping you here, and making you do X, Y, and Z under the guise of God saying these things so that somebody higher up can get their needs met.
It's like dangling a carrot.
Yeah.
They do just enough. And this is what narcissistic abusers actually do. It's just really interesting that on a personal level, you can deal with the narcissist, but on macro levels, you can deal with churches, and then you can deal with the corporations and government and all of that. Like all of these ideas are really tied. So it goes from the personal to the political, it goes from micro to macro scale. But that's what narcissistic abusers do, is like they will dangle a carrot. So they'll give you a little something or come with a little bit of affection and then pull it back. But come with a little something, pull it back. So they keep you in this kind of like manipulated, dependent state, And I mean, I know we personally witnessed that as children with our father, who is notorious narcissist. Like, we know that. And like something he would do is like, he would do something horrific, like act like abuse his children one day, and the next day take us shopping. And then right before we went back home to our mother, so we would be like, oh, we just bought all these clothes, we did all this stuff, when 2 days before he had like slapped the shit out of one of us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what he would do. And eventually, even as kids, we caught on and we were like, I don't care about you buying this stuff. I'm still going to speak up about it. I'm going to say whatever, right? Like, we would fight back against that, I remember one time I was like, you can take the clothes back. I don't care. I don't care, because like, you still did what you did, right? So eventually, you got to like break that boundary, but that's what he would do. That was his tactic. do something horrific and then try to sugarcoat it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To keep you
Yeah,
in this like
that's like kind of what
dependent
the church.
state.
That's exactly what the church does.
Yeah.
On top of too, I don't know if she talks about this in the video, but I don't. From my experience, I'm going to preface it by saying that most of my abusers were from the church. Like,
Yeah, no, actually, yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
None of them were outside of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And our sperm donor was I don't know if he was an atheist or he would consider himself an atheist, but he definitely did not go to church.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reasons. I don't know the ins and outs of that. But I think him not going to church, and we would go to church with other family members on his side or whatever, occasionally or whatever. But that made me look at church very differently and critically think about church, because it was like, well, why is he not going? Like, what is the bigger picture here in what he's saying?
And also,
I don't think it wasn't that he didn't believe in God. He just didn't believe in the institution of a church.
But he also would, so many of his beliefs and ideologies were tied up in that narcissism, which is aligned with a church philosophy. So I don't even think that he was like disconnected from a church. Actually, I think he carried.
I think he was disconnected from the institution as a whole. Now, his ideas were still rooted in misogyny and patriarchy because he's a man. Like that's those things just happen to be in common. That's all, I think. But he didn't necessarily believe in the institution.
The Bible.
That's not to say, but I don't think you don't have to not believe in God or believe in God and not be able to quote the Bible. We're talking about the institution as a whole, not necessarily the Bible per se. Yeah. We're talking about the physical church and the people that are in the church who are super religious, not even super religious, but are super church-ish.
Yeah. I always felt like he looked down on people who went to church and believed in Jesus, and like he like saw it as this like idiotic thing that people participated in. Like he always looked down on it, but he looked down on everybody. So like it never.
Fair. But the thing is, I also, and don't hate me for this, I think he also I would hate to say that they were dumb, but I also understand that the critique of looking down on some people who are so rooted in the church, because it's like a lot of these people are.
He just did his.
I can understand it because a lot of them are hypocrites.
In my opinion,
you know what I mean? I understand. Like he is hypocritical in his maybe his rationale. I don't know the full ins and out, right? So I don't know. But the church is so hypocritical in that it is pushing one thing, right? Of like, oh, hope, great people, religion, everything's going to be okay. This is a safe space, and it's none of those things. I can't remember it ever being that for me. Mm-hmm. Do you ever remember it being that for you? So I can understand why he's like, you believe in this very thing that is, first of all, also hurting you and those that you love. It's not a safe space. Typically, all they're doing is wanting you to follow what they want you to follow, which is, to me, indoctrination. They're taking your money, your resources, and for what? To provide you indoctrination? That's very
I can understand that. I get that from a logical perspective. I just think it's ironic for him because he enacted those very same things he claimed to not want to be a part of against his own family members, his own children.
But I think the difference is he didn't do it from. The difference is I think he didn't do it from a place of being, oh, I'm super religious. That's just what he chose to be, right? Yeah. So that's the difference. Which is why I say, like, it also makes sense to me, because it's like, it's if you're critically thinking about these things, his conclusion is not very far-fetched.
Yeah. No, I get his conclusion. I know why he didn't go to church, because I mean, even for me, it was like, we were little kids, like, I just want to sit in church all day. Like, I don't want to be here all day, right? Mm-hmm. It was plain and simple for that. It just is. He also is a hypocrite because he's claiming that this institution is so negative towards what, like, quote, the dumb people, but he goes and he does the exact same thing. So he really isn't trying to make a change. He wants to usurp power for himself. He wants to be the church for the women and children in his life. He wants the same abuse of power that the church had against the congregation. He enacted that same abuse of power against women and children. And unfortunately, those two children were us.
I don't know if I agree with that, but hey.
I think he did. I mean, a lot of his narcissistic behaviors aligns with the behaviors that a church exhibits against the congregation, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We're comparing, even though they have a similarity in being patriarchal and being misogynist and being narcissistic, we're still comparing apples and oranges.
I think they are. I mean, I agree. I think they're apples and oranges, but they're both fruit.
Yeah, but they're very different fruits. Even if they come from the same family, right? It's still very different. Because from what I recall, he wasn't raised super religious. Like he wasn't raised
Our
in church, was
grandmother
he?
was religious.
Yeah, but I think that was later on in life.
I thought he was raised religious because even the people,
yeah.
even when he wasn't with our grandmother, that was still a religious family.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not saying that he is using the church tactics of like tithing and, just keep on praying, He's not using the same tactics, but I think his behavior, that dangling the carrot stuff, he was doing that. That women should stay in a women's place, he was doing that.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's beyond, that's a very much patriarchal, very misogynist thing happened. It benefits the church. So that's why those things are there. Mm-hmm. But the same thing could be said about capitalism as a whole.
I agree.
So that's what I'm saying. We're comparing apples and oranges.
Our father aligns with that's what I was talking about with the micro and the macro are similar, or one comes from the other. So you got these big capitalistic, our government is capitalistic, right? Then you get to corporations. Then you get to institutions like the church, right? Then you get down to maybe a pastor who's a leader of a flock. Then you get down to the individual person. When all of their values align, they're doing similar behaviors. It just looks different on different scales. Our father
just didn't
have access to a congregation of people. He had access to us, and he abused that.
I disagree, but hey, whatever.
Well,
this is not what this episode's about. So
sorry. I mean, I know that's a tangent. I just think their behaviors are similar, but
yeah, because that's what I'm saying. They're both rooted in misogyny and patriarchy. Obviously, it's going to be similar, but we're still comparing apples and oranges. Very different things, and I think very different reasons for why we got to both.
I guess so. I don't know.
Anyways, back to the church.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, let's go to the next TikTok, actually.
Okay.
Play that one. This was actually kind of what we were talking about before. Yeah, so she's talking about Big Pharma and that comparison between the two.
The Black church operates like Big Pharma. They need a certain amount of people to stay sick so they can continue to make money. Now that Black women are removing their membership from the church, they're also not bringing their children to the church, which is going to be the church's new tithers. It is way easier to indoctrinate a child than it is an adult. And by rituals like christenings, baptisms, dedicating your entire life to the Lord at 10 years old, you are now indoctrinating children to worship the church and give money to the church. And within that community, you are telling little kids to blindly follow authority, to be submissive and obedient, and to stay pure and innocent. The church is a perfect hunting ground for predators. And whether we like to admit it or not, the church hides predators and protects predators because predators and the church have a mutual understanding. The predator gets some type of authority in the church and also gets an endless supply of victims. And the church now gets an endless supply of sick people that they can convince that they need to do better because of what happened to them. And now that Black women are finding community outside of the watchful eye of churchmen, that is messing with the church's current money and the church's future money by way of your children. And in the church's eyes, if God gave his only begotten son, Black women, why can't you do the same thing?
Okay, so what she's really talking about, I think this is interesting, is the indoctrination of children in church, right? And she's talking about how the big church operates a lot like Big Pharma, that they need these people to stay sick, basically, or suffering in the church's case, in
Mhm.
order to keep people tithing, to keep people invested in this system. And so she's saying that the children, that they need people to actually have children and to bring those children as new members. So things like baptisms and christenings, and like even things probably like children's church are all part of that indoctrination process, where
Yeah.
you get the children invested early in their lives in this system.
Yeah, and she
So that there's
specifically says to blindly follow authority. And I think that's the key to how that's like the key to brainwashing, if you ask me. And that's how they're able to keep the kids there in a place of not growing and going on their self-love journey, and to continue to also attend that particular church.
Ooh, she said something for real here. You watch the whole video?
Yeah, I'm watching it.
She said, and this is important, she said, we're telling our children to blindly follow authority, to stay pure and innocent, which is a
And
perfect
obedient.
breeding, and obedient, which is a perfect breeding ground
for
for
predators.
predators. And just like Catelyn said, most of the predators we've experienced in life have been through church. Not to mention, we hear constantly coming out about all the pedophiles that are in churches, not just Black churches. Okay, there's a lot of white churches too, right? Like so and so pastor is low key touching little kids on the side, or like raping little boys, or like raping little girls, right? Like it's constantly coming out that this stuff is happening in church. But if you think about how they're indoctrinating people, it's literally where predators, like that's a predator's playground.
Oh,
Because
for
they got
sure.
people who are just blindly following your lead, right?
And then you're telling your kid to basically not have any
Not to speak
voice or
up
say
if something
so or
happens.
speak up, because the only thing you should do is follow authority blindly, be obedient, and listen to your elders. All of these archaic viewpoints. And the reason why I say archaic is because these are not promoting optimal, in my personal opinion. It's not promoting a child to be its optimal self. It's teaching a kid to always follow someone else. That's what it's teaching a kid. On top of, in today's world, that is could be detrimental with the current climate that we live in.
Agreed.
So the fact that people do this so willingly is crazy. Like, I don't have the opportunity or the space to mess up, let alone let something like that happen to me for there to be a mess up. And obviously we know how trauma works. Whatever's happened to you happens to you, and you're left to deal with it. Right. And so if the church is doing that and your parents are willingly telling you to just accept it, sit down and shut up, where is the out? What do? You keep going back.
It's not even just sit down and shut up. It's like, this is somehow a tied to your grace with the Lord, with like a higher power, you know? So it becomes even more than just like, be obedient. It's like, Jesus is watching. Right? Right? Or like whatever,
and Jesus wants you to do X, Y, and Z. When Jesus ain't say nothing to me.
Right. Or, okay, I love what she said. She said, this is the cycle. She broke it down. She said, the predators in church have an understanding. Predators get some type of authority in the church. And with that authority, they get an endless supply of victims. But the church, it has an endless supply of sick people due to the predator's victimization of the people. So it's a cycle. It's like predator, victim. That same victim also is a sick person that the church can use to like use that
typically
indoctrination.
Once
Like,
that person is victimized, and here's the thing too, once that person is victimized, right, they typically then become a predator. So the cycle continues. It never ends.
Continues. And I was like, I never thought about that. Like, it's a parasitic relationship that ultimately leaves the victim suffering, but that the church could be in on your victimization as well. Because it's like, it's like, if you have, deacon so and so is like touching kids inappropriately, or touching not even just kids, women inappropriately. Then you go to the pastor about it, and they're like, well, you know how deacon so-and-so is. They don't remove him from the board. They don't take him off the deacon board. They don't chastise him or remove him from the church.
at all.
It's your job as a victim to just pray about it, which what does praying
Deal
about it
with
mean?
that.
Back to church, pay us again, give us, your time and attention and whatever for to heal that way, versus seeking, like something like therapy, something like self-empowering, realizing the trauma that happened to you, maybe not even disassociating from that church, right? Like, that's the steps that they tell you to go down. It's just basically come back to our institution. You've already suffered at the hands of our institution, but you need our institution to heal. It's really effed up.
I see a comment, and it says, it's so easy to see from an outside perspective, but when you're in it, you're in it. And the creator of the video, she said, isolating a victim is the first tool of a narcissist. That's exactly what they do, right? Down to, like I said earlier, they want you to sell you this dream. They want to sell you this hope, but they're nowhere to be found. Typically, if something really is going on in your life, they're like, oh, you'll figure it out, right? But you go and tithe every month. You're something to them, but they can't be nothing to you. On top of housing predators, as soon as something happens to you, oh, you're on your own. Deacon XXXX would never. Did you look at his record? Because his record alone will tell you. On top of, this person has a bunch of kids, and their kids are doing the same thing, and it's just it's honestly disgusting that people continue to believe that this is this sanctified, holier than thou institution, and not critically thinking about it, and then giving their kids away to it. It's like, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I saw somewhere that some church, a lady, she was like a single mother with like a couple of kids, and her son had been like molested by the preacher. I want to say, I don't know if it was Eddie.
The sad thing is, that's not surprising. That is so common.
And it was in a black church too. Like, the preacher was like punishing the kids, like, oh, you're being bad, blah blah blah, but then also raping the kids at the same time. So like, okay, but yeah. So I just think, and then they have this weird thing with single mothers. Like, they condemn people for being single mothers, but then they prey on the single mothers' kids, or they prey on the single mothers themselves because they know they're like more vulnerable. Like, it's just very.
It's crazy.
It's completely
literally crazy.
So toxic. Like, it's so toxic. And like, if churches had to pay people for the amount of abuse they cause folks, bankrupt instantly.
Yeah. Yes, no money on my card.
For real. But I want to know who's keeping these church institutions still alive, because I feel like so many younger people are leaving the church in droves.
I think the older generation is what's keeping it alive right now.
But what happens when
the older generation?
Because they're dying.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. So that's going to be the interesting part. Look, I think our parents' generation is going to be the stopping point for sure.
Yeah. I think our parent generation might be the last group of people really going to church, because like the millennials and people slightly older than us, or even and certainly people younger than us, I don't actually have any friends who go to church.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't have a single friend that continues
even like
to
when
go
I was
to
in
church.
College, I don't know anybody who regularly goes to church.
Yeah, me either. I had obviously I went to like a church-based college, which was interesting, right? The things that you see and hear in an institution like that is interesting, especially when you tie it to the career path they want to go down, right? Your worst individuals on campus, typically speaking, were those who were, I'm going into ministry, I'm going into all of these godly practices, right? These are the people that were raping people on campus, groping people on campus, having sex with a bunch of people on campus. So it's just interesting. And this is why I say too that, like, obviously we grew up and we had a parent who was not really into church. Cool. that was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's something to think about. And then you have our experience in the church. Okay, that's something to think about. And then you have the people that we were holier than thou, but the ones that are abusing us, that's also another thing to think about. Then I go to a Christian school. That's something to think about. And then you have, coming out of all of that and not having the influence of the church in my life being significantly better. Why am I going?
Right.
Why am I going? There's nothing, this is not yielding me anything. And I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about the institution of the church. This is not yielding me anything. And then I hear about, a family member who's really, really, really heavily in the church. And I hear about their experience with the church. What makes you think I should go?
Mm-hmm.
And why am I going? And every time you go, right? Every time this person goes back to the church, some way, somehow she's victimized by the church once again, or somebody in the church. Every single time. And you want me to go. No. If you want to continue to be, a victim, go ahead. By all means, if that's the journey that you want to put your life on, go for it. But God didn't tell me that was my journey. So you're not going to tell me that was my journey.
Another thing I think about too is like, I've known several people who have been like, who grew up in a church setting, and so they had to they were heavily in it. And I see the difference between how they are able to interact with the world now as adults versus like we had more of a secular upbringing. And it's like, I feel like you're robbing your child of something when you indoctrinate them in that, that system for so long, especially as children, because then you're like, they come out into the real world and they're just, I don't want to say clueless, they're not always totally clueless, but it's very, it just seems like it's like something they don't understand, and it's because they've been like so sheltered for so long by that institution, and it's like it is kind of like that, keep them blind to authority, pure and innocent and obedient. They're like,
and that's the indoctrination right there. It is to keep you subservient. That's it. Yeah.
It's interesting to see as adults,
if you want to
though.
equate it to someone else, right? To take it, I guess, like the Baptist church out of it, the Christian Black church, right? Let's use what's his name, the church guy. He killed all those people with the cyanide.
Jim Jones.
Warren Jeff. We can use Warren Jeffs. We can use Jim Jones. All of them, right? What did they do? They kept people ignorant so they could do what they needed to do, which was whatever sick motive that they had. Warren Jeffs, he was over there molesting children because he was a pedophile. The church keeps predators and pedophiles safe. Prime example. But the thing is, the Black church, we talk so much crap about people like Warren Jeff. But we're doing the same thing. Jim Jones, he probably was doing the same thing. He was about to get caught.
Or pastors who like, even if it's not necessarily children, like pastors who like have all these extramarital affairs.
Oh, for sure.
Or do all this stuff, like prey on women in the church or men in the church. I'm not gonna say they all, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's just it's like, it's sort of sickening. Like, that's why I will not step foot in the church. You couldn't pay me to step foot in the church.
Oh, no, you couldn't pay me.
And it's because I really feel like, honestly, that's a safety precaution that I just take as an adult woman.
Sure, yeah.
I'm like not going into a room full of predatory ass men, to tell you the truth. Like, I'm just not gonna do it and pray with them and like, share life
and pray for what? Like lies? I don't get it. Like, what are we praying for?
Right? I'm like, there's already predatory men who are in the church.
When the church can start being honest, first of all, with itself. First of all, its pastor has to be honest with himself, period. And the church with itself, how the institution is being run and who is in that institution. So we're talking about the rapists, the pedophiles, the men who are, who are cheating on their wives and things like that, right? When we start checking those issues, then you can come talk to me about whether or not I'm going or not. Then and only then, because how am I supposed to feel safe when you guys are supplying me to the freaking prey?
Yeah,
the predator, excuse me.
They create the prey for the predators that like exist in their congregation.
Exactly.
And then they know that they're not, due to things like misogyny and patriarchy, they're going to be protected and dismissed as like, oh, that's just so and so, or pray for so and so, or so and so needs it, rather than actually protecting the victims and kicking them out, or disowning them or disenfranchising them or whatever.
Exactly.
Right? Because when we think about it, all think about our personal life. All of the people who have gone to church and been predators, they're still invited into the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're never kicked out of the church, despite everything that everybody knows about them. So it's like re-victimizing people constantly, and then you're told, "Oh, let me pray. That's gonna help me get out of it."
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to shit on prayer, because yes, prayer is a meditation with Jesus, right, or a higher power. Nothing wrong with the actual act of prayer, but when that act is being used to protect predators or to keep a victim in a victim state, then that's not really prayer. That's manipulation.
Exactly. Indoctrination back again. Here we are.
Yeah.
And that is how you keep the sick people sick. Right there.
Yeah.
And then that's why it's a cycle.
It's a vicious cycle. And it's like, it's no wonder that every time somebody who comes out and is like, comes out to be the pedophile, whatever, it's so easy for them to be, especially if you are a patriarchal, misogynistic
And what
man.
do they do? Every time they come out, right? Say something happens at church A, they just go on to church B, and then C, and then D, and keep doing it.
Who eventually steps in? The law, the secular world has to step in and say, no, you can't do this anymore.
That's if
they get caught.
the church, and I use the quotation marks, but if the church allows you to press charges, essentially, because what they're going to do is like, oh no, let's take this problem out here with the church and let's fix it and let's pray about it and let's get you help for the next person to abuse me. Okay, yeah, that makes plenty of sense.
That's what they were saying that Scientology was doing with Danny Masterson, which I think is interesting, because Scientology isn't even a Christian based religion, but it's just but that goes to show these are institutions of indoctrination. It's not about if you're praying to Jesus or Allah or freaking what's the Buddhist Buddha, whoever. These are Buddhism. Institutions. Yeah, Buddhism. Like, these are institutions tied to ideologies, right? Which is misogyny, the patriarchy, the this, the that, right? So Danny Masterson's his victims, a lot of them were women in the church, right? Or young girls in the church that were told not to say anything about his abuse of them. Scientology. Okay. It's pretty interesting that Scientology, which can arguably not be even tied to a god, right? Is the same practices that are going on in a godly, holy religion, right? Christianity, correct?
Yeah.
So this goes to show that these are methods of control and manipulation.
100%. 100%.
It has little to do with what the actual religion of it is. And actually, my thought is this: if Jesus came down today, real Jesus came down, not like church, everything that church is like telling you, came down.
You have to preface that. Should tell you what you need to know,
right? I think if he came down, he would be like, "What is this? This is not what I told you to do." I really think so, because and at least in my interpretation of the Bible, Jesus was all about giving to the poor, giving to those disenfranchised, actually sustainably helping people. The miracles he was working were altering people's lives for the better, so that theoretically they wouldn't even have to necessarily be followers of him. But like his followers were because he performed miracles to improve these people's lives. What is the church doing to improve your life besides keeping you coming back every Sunday? Seriously.
Yeah. Not a fan. Won't be going.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
And I'm not against fellowshipping with people. I'm not against like community in your religion. I'm not saying that, but I think you walk a very tight rope if you don't if you're not analyzing and thinking critically about these things.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's watch the third video.
All right.
The reason why a lot of you guys are so good at gaslighting is because your second narcissistic relationship was with the church. The first one was with your parents who brought you to the church. And because your indoctrination started so young, you are now becoming a mouthpiece for your abuser. And isn't the whole concept of church a whole bunch of people communing and listening to someone's perspective about a book that constantly is getting altered? I'm never going to tell anyone that the Bible doesn't have good stories about being moral and being a good person, but so does Disney. The only difference between the black church and Disney is that Disney pays taxes and Disney's a little bit more open about their corruption. The black church does neither. I'm never going to tell anyone to not have a relationship with God. Instead, I'm going to tell black women to come together and form their own relationship with God internally and through a community that is safe and not going to continuously gaslight you or make you feel bad about not being able to live by a book written by man 1,000 years ago that literally cannot be followed in modern society without getting arrested. And this is exactly why they told you never to question them. Because if you start questioning the Bible, you're going to start seeing the hypocrisy that runs rampant through the book.
Okay, so in this one, she's talking about how the church is narcissistic, right? And the reason why you may have some difficulty, understanding your relationship with the church is because the church was the first, your parents were the first narcissist that you experienced, and the church happens to be the second narcissist that you're experiencing. And so she's basically saying that this is your children, your parents are setting you up to basically be manipulated and indoctrinated way before you ever get to the church. So what do you think about that?
I mean, we got two different examples in our personal life because we have the reason why our mother took us to church and then the reason why we went to church on our dad's side. And there's obviously a stark difference. I would say what I noticed is I think mom was looking for a real higher connection with something, especially when we were younger children. That's what it appeared to be. And it seemed like it was something that she was like, this is just what you do. We go to church. I went to church as a kid. This is proper for my children to go to church and like learn about Jesus and how, all of that, right? But then I compare it to how church worked in like our fathers, and who, as we have stated many times, fathers and narcissists. And that was much more of he wasn't pushing us to go to church. We would go to church with our grandmother a lot. And it always felt like, I don't know how to describe that church. It felt more like victimized people to me for some reason. I don't know why. It felt more like poor, unfortunate souls come to us kind of thing. And so I feel like I don't feel like mom was the narcissist who brought us to church. I think mom was more of an innocent victim.
Yeah.
Into church ideology. And she ended up bringing her children. And then, we became people also eventually victimized by people in the church, right?
Yeah.
Versus, I think our grandparents was just more, again, sort of that victim idea, but it was just different. I don't know how to explain it. Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't have anything to say. I was just agreeing.
Yeah, like.
But yeah, I don't think I perceived our grandmother's church to be like that. I think it was more of like, what I will say, there was a lot of older individuals attending that particular institution, and I don't remember a lot of like youthfulness being there. It was a lot of like, I don't remember a lot of married people either. It was a lot of like single older women. Is what I remember. And now this is just my recollection. I don't know how true or not this is, right? But and I think a lot of them seem to have a lot of like family,
like connection.
Yeah, connection issues maybe. So like somebody in the family was like missing, or they didn't connect with somebody, or somebody has chosen to not interact or things like that. Like I don't remember it being, all you saw was black women, and they would go and eat. For them, I think it was more of like a hangout than anything.
Yeah, I think it was definitely like a sense of community.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
In a way that I guess in comparison to our mother, it was the churches we would go to with our mother. It was very preachy with our mother's churches. It was very much a like,
this is what you should do.
Get the word, This is what Jesus is saying through me, the
Yeah.
pastor.
To be fair, I went for the music. The music is A1. Okay.
Yeah. Now, Mom's church's music was top tier.
It was always A1.
Yeah. But like you said, that's why I felt it felt more like these poor, lonely souls gathering at our church. It was my grandmother's church because it was just very it felt very solemn. It felt like it was sad. It was sort of a sad church.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do remember being like, it was very, almost like eerie, eerily sad.
It was an eerie, sad church because there was no, Mother's church was like, we would go be greeted, even though there was abuse going on, we would be welcomed. It was warm and it was more youthful. So it was sister so-and-so, like, hey, how you doing? Like, blah, blah. We see they would keep up with us. They would oh, these are your kids. Like, how y'all doing in school? Kind of thing, like that kind of stuff. Versus our grandmother's church, maybe because we didn't go all that often. It was very cold.
But there was no youthfulness. Like, we would be the only kids a lot of the time if we went.
We'd be one of the few kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. Maybe that's what it is. It felt very cold and removed and austere.
And it very much gave old slave house, to be honest. Like it was
because it was also in the middle of the woods in Aiken, South Carolina.
Yeah.
So it was you got to drive miles to go even find this church, and it's literally in the middle of the woods.
Literally the middle of nowhere.
And there's
on top of it also was really, 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 really old. So it was very, it just gave very that's what I imagined those old schoolhouses back in slavery days used to look like, to be honest.
It probably was converted into from something.
Probably, yeah. Maybe that's the attachment. Who knows?
Maybe, but it was so it was just so old. And it felt like if it wasn't around in slavery day, it was definitely during a Jim Crow era. You know?
Yeah.
It always reminded me of the church in The Color Purple.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Because you know how that church in the movie was just middle of the woods, nowhere. Just a church. You had to drive down a dirt road to get to this church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Several dirt roads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, okay, we digress. Back to the video that we were talking about by Daven. Or was it Daven?
I like Daven, but that's me.
Daven, excuse me, Daven. She was saying the reason why a lot of people are really good at gaslighting is because the church essentially taught you. Before the church taught you, your parent taught you, right? And so I would agree with that, in that a lot of the churches, that's essentially what they're doing. You come to them with your problems because that's supposed to be a place of hope and of and refuge, if you will, for whatever problems you're going through. They gaslight you and you end up staying tight and giving them what they need, but you are not really getting what you need as from a spiritual point or whatever, right? And even further than that, she says that you then become a mouthpiece for your abuser, aka the church. And so that goes into the idea of continuing to be the prey and predator. At one point, you're prey, and then you preach these things, and you become the predator. So whether you're directly physically harming someone, if not, you're then trying to get people to get into the cycle that you're in, which is in the church, and indoctrinating people so that people will stay and come to the church so that you can get what you want, right? So it's just, I just don't, for the life of me, understand why people still go.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I think also on the gaslighting, tip that she said, I think it's also, gaslighting is about telling someone that their experiences are not real. Right? So, like we keep saying with the predator situation, they're when they're telling you just pray it away or talk to Jesus about it, they're telling you not to handle your victimization or in some cases crimes committed against you, to not handle it in any other way outside of that building, that church, that community of people. So they're telling you that your experiences are essentially not reputable, they're not valid. So that is a form of gaslighting. They're telling you that you're not, that this shouldn't be, you shouldn't alert the authorities, you shouldn't tell people outside of our community about this, right?
On top of, I would even venture to say isolating the individual so they don't feel like they have an out, right? Because now you have no one really to turn to, right? You may have told this one person in the church, but like now it's like, oh, let's keep this secret between you and I. So you may feel like you can trust this person, but really they're isolating you.
Or they're like, did that really happen? They question whether you have the capability to discern your own victimization, you know? So I don't know. It's like, ooh, geez, we already ruffled feathers, but
I don't know.
Anyway, let's get to our last video from Daven.
Okay.
We cannot sugarcoat our oppression to make you feel comfortable with oppressing us. And historically, Black men has used religion, specifically the Black church, as a way to oppress Black women to gain position within white supremacy. The issue is a lot of Black men want us to talk about religious trauma or our trauma without bringing them up. You don't want to be held accountable for the things that you may not have participated in, but you definitely benefit from. I would never ask a Black man to sugarcoat any of the oppression that white men have caused them because it would make a white man feel better. What do I look like asking a Black man to tell a white man that he helped him off the auction block? But I don't like being sold. That is what you continuously ask Black women to do. But I would ask for Black men not to try to colonize the space that is given to Black women, very small amount of space that is given to Black women, for them to express their religious trauma at the hands of religious Black men.
Now, this is interesting. Every single one of these videos, now she's hitting on something here. I mean, other ones too.
Please go watch her videos. Go watch how she, obviously we're playing them in this, but go back and watch so we can support her.
Yeah. So what she's really saying in this one is she's really discussing Black men. I think somebody made a comment like, well, you just hate Black men. You just hate Black men, which of course, God, I was always one of them. But so she was saying that actually
what she talks about in this is lacking accountability, just as much as the commenter who commented on this is lacking accountability, right? Even if you did not directly do something, there has to be accountability on the behalf of being a man. Period.
Yeah. And participating in those systems.
Right? And commenting something like this. If you listen to what she says, she's not bashing Black men. What she's bashing is the institution of a religious practice, aka Christianity, in the Black church, and the patriarchal views and narcissistic views and misogynistic views and processes that these things employ, right? That's it. There was not a single critique. I don't even remember her mentioning Black men this entire critique. So
she didn't until the man brought it up.
So I'm just like,
and so now she's like, okay,
I'm not understanding.
Since
you want to go ahead and call us out, let's go ahead and call you out. Let's do it. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just like it really frustrates me. Like, how do you make, and which goes into, in my personal opinion, goes into the narcissism, right? And the patriarchy about everything has to be about you. Well, if the shoe fits, the shoe fits, my sir.
Yeah,
that's not my problem.
Right.
You made the show fit, not me.
Exactly.
Anyways, I digress.
Yes. Okay. So basically, what she's talking about is how Black men have used the institution of church historically as a way to basically usurp the power of white supremacy, and mimic the same institutions that like a white institution would, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting because as women, as Black women, we've already been having this discussion about decentering men, decentering Black men specifically, and stepping away from those institutions from that, I don't say institutions, but stepping away from those relationships and community because those communities have historically not served us. And they employ things like gaslighting and misogyny to remove accountability for their wrongdoings, right?
Yeah. And like I said, even if you have personally not done these things as a human race under the gender of men, you're going to have to take accountability. Just like as a woman, I have to take a level of accountability that even maybe I have not directly imposed on anyone. I have to take that.
Yep.
So I don't understand why it's so difficult for other people to do that. Like, I mean, I guess there is a level of difficulty, but like, Jesus Christ.
I think it's difficult if you are not used to not being centered. If
Yeah,
you feel
maybe
like your position is being questioned or threatened,
yeah,
or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And that's what they feel, because this hierarchy has served them for however long.
Yeah,
but
for so long.
Now the people who have suffered under them are no longer are becoming aware of their suffering and saying, I'm choosing not to be a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's scary to them, because if all you've ever known is oppress,
Yeah,
suddenly,
now their power's on the line.
Yeah, their power's on the line, their identity's on the line, everything about them is on the line, versus the people who have been, trampled on for so long have already created identities outside of that environment. Like, you don't have to tell Black women to like figure it out, because historically what have they done? Figured it out, right?
Fair enough.
So even under those oppressive systems, so like, it's like, we'll be fine. They're the ones shaking in their boots. But I just think it's interesting that this is really, again, tied to white supremacy and Black men aligning themselves with white supremacy.
Yeah.
Again, which is what we have constantly seen over and over again. It's not that they actually want to liberate the entire community. They want the power that white men have.
Yeah, true. Which is why I say, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges when we were talking about sperm donor, because it really boils down to patriarchy. This is just another means to an end that I don't think would be as obvious by using the guise of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
But in your point, it all is the same, right?
Like the narcissism and the
the narcissism, the patriarchy, misogynistic views, and things like that.
Yeah,
they're all pushing the same narrative.
I think so. It's not, they're enacted in different ways, but I think the underlying ideology is the same. Like, why companies like we're talking about the writer's strike, why they held out on the writer's strike for so long, the same underlying reason, believing that you should have the power, you should have control over somebody else's existence, right? That is the same belief that our father held against us, right? It's not to say that, like, obviously these companies have more power, resources, and it looks different because they're able to, carry out exploitation in bigger, more, I guess, sustainable ways. But it's a similar ideology from, what, I don't know, what's the current strike that's happening? Or we could just take Black church. It's a similar ideology. It's like, you need to stay subservient to me. Don't question my authority. All right. And if you do have a negative experience with me, it didn't actually happen. Or, which is the gaslighting. Or if you, I'll dangle a carrot in your face so that if I do something wrong that I recognize as wrong, hopefully you'll just keep coming back because I gave you a little something, right? Classic narcissist. I don't see these things as really any different. They're enacted on macro or micro scales. That's what I think. I really do. And what Daven is talking about here is how the Black church has enabled and excused Black men who are perpetrating this against Black women in the community, or either personally or in church communities, for so long. And yeah, it's all linked to me. I just don't see it as, it might be apples and oranges. They might physically have a different taste, but they're both still fruit, meaning they all come from a tree.
Yeah. Okay. I hear that.
That's what I think. And like, the problem is it's like, okay, if we're talking about fruit, you might have an orange tree versus an apple tree. Produce different things, different physical fruit that we consume, right? But if both of them are trees, and we know how trees operate, right? both trees got to have sunlight, got to have water, got to have the soil, got to have enough space, right? They got to have all of these essential ingredients to produce the fruit. If both trees are in a tree of toxicity, then they're both producing toxic fruit. It doesn't matter what it looks like or what the fruit ends up tasting like. You know what I mean? And yeah,
just sperm donor is a little. That's all.
I mean, it looks different because it's a personal thing, you know. I think.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So,
anyways, I guess that's our chat on the institution of a church, right?
Black church
I think
specifically.
Black church specifically because that's our experience, but I think these could apply to any institutional church, honestly.
Yeah.
Right. So we are specifically talking about the Black church, but it really could apply. So anyways, we really do appreciate you guys listening in on this episode. I know this one's probably a little bit difficult to hear for some viewers, but we still hope that you enjoyed it. And if you have any differing opinions or thoughts or anything like that, we want to know those too, because we are trying to critically think about these things. So please share those with us in the comments, so that we can have a whole view of what we are talking about, right? If there's something different to offer, right? But join us in the next one, and we look forward to chatting with you next time.
We should do a benediction. You know how they do benediction at the end of the church?
I'm dead. I am dead.
I used to love the benediction because I was like,
babe.
we can go home.
Take me back.
I used to love it though.
Facts. My favorite part of church was definitely the music and the welcome song. The welcome song was always good.
Oh yeah.
The church let you make you welcome.
Just gonna make you welcome to this something land. Land. Yeah, that was lit. I don't know who came up with that, but that was
when you go around hugging everybody. COVID. I'm so glad.
Yeah, COVID.
No wonder everybody was sick. Why is you in my face?
Was because you were hugging everybody at church the previous Sunday.
Exactly. And you was at Bible study Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, some random day that no one knows exists. So,
oh my God.
Yeah,
thank God we never had that upbringing.
People
who say that they go to church every single day of the week, I was like, ooh, y'all really is.
Yeah, bless your soul.
Bless your whole entire soul, because I could not imagine
that. Sounds like torture.
It really does.
That literally sounds like torture.
I remember when Mom got in her spirit to like go on Wednesday nights, and we were like dying.
Like, absolutely not.
Oh my God.
Absolutely not, lady. I'm so sorry. Like, no, this will not be my identity. If this is yours, go for it, but it will not be mine.
For real. But yeah, church. I do love gospel though. That is something that stuck with me, and I will always
delicious.
Love gospel music.
Yeah.
And we have to give the church credit for creating so many phenomenal musicians and singers. Like, honestly, I would say Black church is really the root of like Black American music and therefore American music, because without that institution, I don't think music, even you could get down into even how hip hop is like tied to.
Oh yeah.
You know, for sure. The music made in Black churches. So I think American music owes a lot to the Black church. Let's just be real on that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the one part, right?
Yeah, for real. The one part. So, but yeah, thanks for listening to this episode, everybody. We hope to see you in the next one. We hope we gave you some really good ideas to think about as you move forward in your life, and in my favorite thing to say, your walk with Christ, because we all have a walk with Christ.
Not the walk with Christ, honey. It's giving very future. It's giving very doctrination.
Anytime, it's the same thing as saying different strokes for different folks. Like people say, like, oh well, that's just how so and so lives, or that's so and so's blah blah. I just say we all got our own walk with Christ.
That is hilarious.
Which is true. We do. But anyway, thanks guys for listening. Keep on walking with Jesus, with Christ. I'm on my walk.
Jesus, you know what I mean? Christ, not I'm on my journey. Christ. Yeah, let's walk with Jesus and not past the
walk
Christ.
Walk with Jesus. Amen.
Yes, sir.
And make sure it's Jesus, not the devil. Walk with Jesus, not the devil.
Right. He's busy. Yes, he is.
Really, he
might be in your church, so watch yourselves.
Seriously. But thanks for listening, everybody. You all have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.